Anybody who calls himself an adventurous music listener, a fan of music as opposed to a fan of trends and a fan of haircuts and a fan of fashion, more people who listen to new music nowadays tend to be fashion-oriented and don't know what music really is. Like if you can talk about even just like you said, value prices to spend $8 and get 90 minutes of music on a cassette, as opposed to spending $8 on an album and getting 37.5 minutes of the same thing. Steve, you get songs and bits of free association and found sounds and comedy and, you know, above all, there's the songwriting and the musicianship, and it's all done at home and all crafted by Steve. What we're dealing here with, or dealing with here, is a full deck of high-quality tone poems that will be available for a lifetime. And you may slap on this disc or a quarter-inch mastered CD spinning in reverse in like the year 2005, and it'll still sound as crisp and fresh and startling then, maybe even more so then. Probably the most ironic thing is when Steve is older, and when we're in a rocking chair with no teeth and we're looking back on this particular interview, and at that time the nation will be waking up to Steve Moore's music.
Nah, well, that's possible.
Come on,
Maybe.
Sure it will.
Maestro?
Welcome to the wonderful world of tape. This is course 301 on your laboratory card, and we hope you will enjoy learning the enriched principles of sound. Please use your designated student manual as often as possible, and if you have any questions, ask your deck.
Let's back up and start in 1968. Now let's just talk about how you got into home tape.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was raised in this, you know, upper class suburban home, and got into music early. And
did your dad teach you to play guitar?
Not really. I was born with it. I was born with, an amazing ear for arrangements, and I mean, it's all started real early. And obviously, I mean, I had a strange childhood because it sort of stunted whatever weird genius thing that I was born with, and I broke away and got into taping my own music, and that started very primitively. You know, I mean, the '68 recordings were, you know, horrendous in a lot of ways, but in some ways, what goes around comes around, and you know, they're priceless now. I mean, just cherished because they're so primitive and stuff. But getting back to my father, that whole thing sort of exploded because I was I was doing a lot of recording sessions like my father was. He would get me sessions. I could have stepped right in his footsteps and pretty much stayed with it, but I would go home from these sessions and do, you know, maniacal, you know, searing electric guitar rave-ups at home under headphones after having coming from a session of doing, you know, real, you know, shit-kicking, divorce, blah, 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 country kind of stuff. All the while, my mother is from up here in New Jersey originally, and her brother was my uncle Harry Palmer, was always a hip 60s counterculture, you know, music person, was in a great late 60s group called Ford Theater. He was always supportive of my tapes. I was sending him out my tapes, and finally, after, you know, many years, in '78, he said, "You got to come up here. You cannot be stuck in Nashville and expect anything to happen." So, I mean, he coaxed me to move up here. There's nothing that could, you know, possibly have happened if I stayed in Nashville. So I came up here and been here ever since.
Darling, let's talk about the crazy side. I've been Nashville.
It's a my whole 70s thing was that. Being stuck in Nashville making this innocent power pop, wacko, homemade music, all by myself, one-man band, that whole thing.
Was your dad sympathetic for what you were doing?
No, not really at all. And I may have had a small handful of moments to where he might have heard something, and I mean, he could have said that he respected me or understood my desire to be a little bit different or whatever, but it was just never anything that he could put his finger on.
A song all about you. A true song.
But I wasn't really paying attention. He was bringing music home, and it was good for my ears to hear it as a child. But and ultimately, nowadays, I'm so happy that I had that upbringing, because it ingrained in my psyche, and I did inherit from my father a good ear, and knowing how to arrange and quickly do, and stuff like that.
I'd like for the whole world to hear. I'd like to get even with you.
And did these famous musicians go in and out of your life as a kid?
Yes, they did.
Tell us a story.
Yeah.
Who was in your family bathroom?
Too many to mention.
Name some.
Family bathroom.
Who was down the hall using the family crapper?
Carl Perkins,
Carl Perkins.
among many.
Well, that's a great story.
Patsy Cline,
Tell us one memory.
Porter Wagner.
Did you ever meet Elvis? No.
I was in the studio with him. I didn't meet him. I was a young chap, so I didn't meet him.
What was he recording? What did you watch him record?
Surrender and the 60s comeback after the Army.
Was your dad
It's
playing
Now
bass?
or Never. My dad was playing bass and led the sessions. He was like the contractor. He led the sessions. He took karate lessons from Presley. Imagine that.